this session. And to take this session forward, we have a very enthusiastic member, and he is also a volunteer. He is the chairman and founder of Health 2.0 India, James Matthew. He will be taking care of this session.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here in this session. We're here to validate some things, justify some things around digital health being a space for entrepreneurs to thrive in. Rightly so. There's a lot of information out there about the challenges around digital health, and but there's significant opportunities, and we're really blessed today to have the panelists that we have right now with us today. I just want to have a couple of opening statements before diving into the panel. We talk about disruption as entrepreneurs. We're ready for that. And there's a human side of healthcare that we all have to think about. And especially here in India and the developing countries, there's just way too many lives that are lost to completely preventable problems. And we have found, working in Africa, in the developing countries, even in the US and developed countries, that digital health is a way to bridge that gap. There are people literally dying today that don't need to, and digital health can actually bridge that gap. So that's a good statement if you're a nonprofit and a missionary or somebody like that. But what about entrepreneurs who are looking to make a profit to solve that problem? Our panelists are a group of people that will help you kind of navigate through both accomplishing the missional side of that statement, but also the for-profit side of that statement. Panelists today, Dr. Ruchi Das is sitting here, and I'll introduce all of these folks in a little bit. Ravi Kumar, and here's their Twitter handles for you. Dr. Ruchi Das is the founder and CEO of Health Consulting Group. She's a global thought leader, and I don't say that lightly, and you hear that term all the time, but her advice and her counsel, certainly here in India, but beyond the borders as well, from the Middle East to Africa to Europe to Canada. She just spent 3 months working on a project in Canada earlier this year as well. Just a great wisdom and practical knowledge with her background and expertise coming to the table. Ravi Kumar is one of you. Entrepreneur, started a company with 3 other guys back in 1998, solving a very specific problem in healthcare. Turned out to be a $480 million a year venture with his application and products being in over 40 countries. Mark Fries, co-founder of a company called Wired.md back in 2000. Started medical school, saw some problems that he felt technology could solve, started the company, sold the company, and now has started a new company. So it's his second turn being an entrepreneur. And Nandu Madhava, here in India, could be doing many things in the US, came back to India to solve healthcare challenges with technology, and is based here in Bangalore, entrepreneur himself. So we have a good mix of thought leaders as well as entrepreneurs that are going to help validate the things that we hear and justify some of the opportunities out there. You're going to hear a lot of stats today, not from me, but from the panel. And there's several infographics out there that justify or warn you of getting into the digital health space. But as you kind of take a look at the infographics back there, and there's a collage of it, and if you want these, you can just let us know and we'll send these to you. We have libraries of them paving the way of information around digital health. I want to kind of quick fire. I want you guys to hear from the panelists just a 1-minute statement on what they feel the opportunities are. Why are you here sitting with entrepreneurs who have looked at digital health, maybe are looking into it, have heard the challenges, feel the opportunities? If you could challenge these guys with a statement and the audience here, just 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Dr. Ruchi, I'll start with you as an opening statement, and just pretend you're on the hot seat, just 45 seconds across, and then we'll dive right into the presentation.
Good morning, folks. I think this is a beautiful day. Thanks, James, for those kind words. I personally feel that digital health is not a new concept. The concept is more than 20 years old. What is new is the morphology and structure of it, and probably the business model that exists today. I would like to say all the entrepreneurs in the house, or would-be entrepreneurs, or who want to get into the digital health field, to help devise some of the innovative business models so that doctors can adapt it, consumers can actually adapt it, and that is the way ahead for digital health in India or worldwide. So that's my statement to go for.
Thank you.
Mark?
Working. So James mentioned, to piggyback on his comment, these preventable deaths, over 20 million preventable deaths every year around the world. And you know what the leading cause of death is in India and in many other countries in the developing and developed world is lack of information. And with the accessibility to the internet, robust medical information, billions of mobile devices, yet that lack of information still exists, and it's really unacceptable. We have tremendous opportunities today to share information with billions of people and help reduce that number. That's 20 million preventable deaths. And I'm passionate about that approach and look forward to sharing with you a little bit more about that, but really thinking about that lack of information and how can digital health bridge that divide.
Thank you, James. I spend a lot of my time traveling, looking at various health systems across the world, and I spend a lot of my time, I think James mentioned about 40 different countries and various health systems. Starting from something which is very rich, you know, if you take the United States, to something like, you know, what we are in India, Russia, places like that. But one thing I see commonly here, and I see a great transformation taking place in healthcare and everywhere. It's almost bordering on a revolution. I think that revolution is actually being fueled by, I think, the digital technologies. And I think there is a great amount of democratization is actually taking place. It's actually brought by the digital technologies, whether it is mobile phones or whether you see digital TV. I think that, you know, particularly in India, I think that's going to do access to healthcare. That's my statement.
Great. I think when I look at digital healthcare in India, I think I see the opportunity to create a service that's relevant for the 99% of India. And when I talk about that is, when I think what we currently have in technology, unfortunately, especially in the online space in India, is a lot of companies that are like catering needs to the 1%. Like, hey, you know, was online or a bunion online at, you know, something.com. And that's really not relevant to the masses. And so I think with kind of the changing context we have in this market, with mobile internet, with widespread 3G available now, and growth around those user bases happening over the next 18 to 24 months, is the opportunity to create services that are relevant for all of India and for huge, huge masses of people, something that can hopefully have a kind of game-changing and disruptive effect on healthcare in India.
Powerful statements. Powerful statements. Thank you, guys. Again, lots of information going to be conveyed today, and I'll let the presenters do that. If there's 4 words you take away from today, these are the 4. Global, mobile, social health. It will be a reality, and the pathway there is full of opportunity and challenges, and that's what we're going to kind of decipher today. The good news is there's a lot of funding and there's a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and startups happening around healthcare globally, even here in India. And people are using business model thinking and human-centered design thinking, disciplined business approaches to solving these problems. And that's what gives us hope about the future. Some of the things that we're used to, if you want to see the doctor, you have to go to a building. You go from left to right. With the advent of the cloud and the devices, Mark is holding an iPad mini right now, that fits into the lab coat pocket of a doctor. The iPad didn't do that before. The iPad mini is set to bring a lot of changes to healthcare. But with the devices and broadband, and then consumer orientation, in the past, doctors, the most that they interacted with technology outside the scientific realm was maybe a mobile phone and a pager, a beeper. Now with consumer-oriented apps, they are now more sophisticated buyers, and they demand more out of the healthcare apps that they're using day to day. So that is spawned off on the bottom, you see there, a bunch of companies around the world, including here in India. Nike, those of you who exercise and run, They are in healthcare. They have these devices you can put in your shoe, you can strap on your elbow, you can on your shoulder, or sorry, your arm, and it connects to your phone. That then connects to the cloud. And if you ran 5 kilometers today, did your friend in London did they need to run 5.5? Daily Feats is a company that's incubating out of Washington, D.C. that's introducing social gaming into the healthcare field. When Nandu just said it, hey, healthcare isn't just about the 1% of us. We all are touched by it, even when we choose our food. Healthcare just doesn't happen when we go to the doctor. When we choose a food we ate today, that is impacting our health. So, recipes, Indian recipes, Persian recipes, American recipes, those kind of websites are coming out there. And then personalized or individual medicine, advances in the studies of human genome, and taking that data and applying it to the data that physicians and users are generating, and then overlaying that artificial intelligence. There's so much we're going to hear today. There's so much opportunity, and there's only so much we can cover in the next 45 minutes. So we encourage you to walk up to these folks to ask more questions, including myself, after the session. But I want to start with Dr. Ruchi, who, like I said, has experience all over the globe, not just in mobile health, but diving deep into solving some real challenges. And she's going to kind of give you a lot of stats around the problems, as well as entrepreneurially where funding is coming from and where the success and challenges are. So Dr. Ruchi, welcome to the stage, and thank you for being here today.
Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. So before I start, let me ask you a question. How many of you sleep 10 hours a day? How many of you don't eat McDonald's? Quite a good number. For that matter, any junk food? Okay. So you will realize where I'm coming from. Talk about innovation. Let's start with the way we were made. We were not made to sit behind the laptop for 12 hours a day, do nothing, binge on Cheetos, come home and sleep for less than 8 hours. Till 1982, when I was born, our forefathers used to recognize what we eat as food. Today, the story is altogether different. So what has changed? The lifestyle, the way we eat, the way we live, and there is something wrong going in your body every point in time, because we were not designed to be like this. So let me take you to some of these slides and set a background of what I'm going to talk about. So you have a burgeoning population, a great healthcare divide, you have resource constraint, you have additional burden of chronic diseases now. At the same point in time, you have no one-stop solution to solve everything. If I ask you, and poor doctors I would say, but if I ask you, where would you start from to change your lifestyle altogether so that you become or you do something equivalent to what our forefathers used to do, that is, strive, run for food, shelter every day, and keep themselves fit? Nobody has got an answer to that, including me. So the answer is, I don't know. So there are common problems and challenges all across the world when we talk about healthcare. Big population, chronic diseases, resource constraint, less number of beds, and so on and so forth. But with the population and disease and everything else, what has also increased is the mobile density in the country. And I'm talking about my own country as well. So what we decided is to do something smarter. Not to talk about getting 100 computers in a village, but to build on something existing, and that was mobile phones. So if there is 50 to 60% penetration of mobile phones in a village, let us devise something, a service or a solution that we can sell, impart, and populate on a mobile phone. And that is what digital health is all about. It includes healthcare IT, e-health, m-health, every component of it. A step further, what all it does, and I know the slide is too verbose, but let me just quickly flip through it and tell you, there is skewed availability of healthcare personnel in the country today. And you must have heard about this service that is launched by Airtel called 54444 Call a Doctor service. 24/7, you can connect to a doctor, call him, take a prescription, get it on your SMS, forward it to your chemist, and the chemist will do a home delivery of drugs. Was it possible 5 years back? No. That's what digital health has brought to us. Small per capita healthcare budget. India is far behind countries like Afghanistan, Zambia, Portugal in terms of the percentage of GDP they spend on healthcare. You and me, all consumers of healthcare, we spend 80% out of our own pocket for our healthcare. How many of you have got healthcare insurance? How many of your healthcare insurance covers cashless hospitalization? If there is no hospitalization, how many of you get covered with health insurance? Here the answer is no hands in the house. So for all of this, what we call as acute care or timely attention, you need to think about yourself on your own. You are not depending on a health insurance company, government, for that matter, anybody. And that is why digital health models in a country like India are more consumer-centric. Because more than the doctors and other stakeholders, a consumer buys it for himself. Readiness. I'm being told in several conferences that m-health, e-health, healthcare IT, these are all new in India. This is basically a US concept. And it will take time in India to get this up and running. Here are some of the stats, and that is from renowned companies like McKinsey and Deloitte. I would love to add my company's name here, but let me run you through the stats. The stats say patients in India, and these are all Indian stats, patients in India are more adaptable to digital health projects and services than in any developed country. The expectations are very, very high. People want it for them, and people want it at any cost. The second thing that I hear in all the conferences is Indian people are poor, because 70% of Indian population live in villages. They probably don't know about our Swiss bank accounts. I met a villager in Rajasthan, and he paid tax which my whole family together is not paying. He is a partner with McDonald's and grows potatoes. He wants healthcare at his doorstep. Can't move away from his fields and his village. Digital health can provide that. Some of the ongoing initiatives, and you must have missed it, but so far there are more than 2,000 initiatives in digital health that have gone through. 234 is the current status of the projects going on in the country. There are more m-health services that are covered by payers in emerging markets than in developed nations. And this is an eye-opener. I have mentioned the source, so if you get access to these slides, you can look them up. They have described it, how they have calculated this number. But this is so great, because we always thought that e-health, m-health, digital health, they are all US-based concepts. But that's not the case. We miss these stats because they don't come by on a daily basis. Doctors in India see promise in offering digital health services. Though there are no incentives, there is no drive from the government, but there is huge demand from the consumer side. And that's why I say digital health is a consumer-driven market in a country like India. Take the 70% of population that Nandu was talking about. People who live in villages, people don't have access to basic health care. We have actually done a lot good, and I have been on the ground with a chola on my shoulders, and I have done these public health deployments myself. We hardly see a change. The reason is, in villages, you go and eradicate the smallest sign of smallpox today, people will start dying of malaria. It's very hard to quantify success because mortality rates would not come up just with a digital health effort. In villages in India, healthcare still starts from clean drinking water, better sanitation facilities, and good roads. And that's why maybe you are missing some of the digital health initiatives that has revolutionized the way healthcare used to be given to some of these people in the country. And I would also tell you that more than 80% digital health initiatives in the country are rural focused and not the other way around. By the way, even if you take 9% of the urban population in India, we outnumber the German population. And these are these 900 million people that can actually afford a Bentley. Let us look at the correct scenario, and I'll just quickly go through this. There are some of the mHealth projects that have been funded last year, more than 12 of them. So it's not a concept today which will not be funded ever. And I can give you a list, you can take it with me later. This is the digital health ecosystem in India. You see 4 stakeholders, major ones in the corner: providers, government, telecom operators, and solution providers. And they interlace between themselves and make a business model to make it work. And there are thousands of business models, so there is nothing like tried and tested, but they are constantly, as I said, they are innovating and constantly evolving. These are some of the players, and some of these are really big names: Fitness First, VLCC, HIPAA, Eli Lilly, ICRI, Merck, ASL, IDEA. We hear of them every day. They've all come up with digital health projects, and I have segregated them in terms of what role they play and what services they're providing. Barriers. We have talked about success a lot. Let's talk about barriers, because entrepreneurs now want to hear what the barriers are. The good thing about digital health is their enabler can be their barrier as well. And let me explain that with a diagram. Evidence and efficacy. If any digital health project demonstrates evidence and efficacy, it becomes an enabler. Otherwise, becomes a barrier. Consumer adoption. Whatever your technology is or product is, if it's not usable, if it's not of use to the end consumer, that would be a barrier. Cost to deploy. Cost. And I'll give you a quick stat. 99% of Indian population goes to websites because of discounts. And all other would shop through unorganized retail. How many of you would agree to that? Why do you shop online? For discounts, for deals. Why do we know that Nicholas Piramal is now, why don't we know that Nicholas Piramal is now Abbott, but why do we know that Groupon is Crazil? Because it's driven by discounts and incentives. Until the time there are no meaningful incentives and reimbursement models for some of these businesses in the country, it will be a barrier. The regulatory climate. That's the biggest barrier. It's very hard to port some data onto anything which is digital till the time it's not structured well. If it's not structured, if it's not standardized, it's very hard to make it digital. And because regulations don't exist in the country, and if they exist, there's a workaround. I myself am an Indian, so don't get me wrong, but Indians have got a workaround for everything. And that's why we have coined the first term in dictionary, which is actually an MBA term now called jugaad. Clinical adoption. Believe it or not, till the time GPs are not being trained about digital health, they'll keep denying it. And you will never ever get to what you can actually bring digital health to. And let me cite an example. I would quote the name for the media people as well, because I want to bring this to their notice. There's a channel called Astha. How many people are aware of that? Perfect. There is a doctor who got interviewed, and he's been asked that Madhumeh, which is diabetes, can it be controlled by continuous monitoring at home using devices like glucometer? And the person says that glucometer is bullshit. Bullshit. It doesn't work. I actually wanted to record that video and put it on a digital health website. Because we are talking about digital health. People don't even believe in medical devices in the country. And the reason for that is GPs have never been trained for technology, ever in their life. There is no center of excellence in the country which can actually talk about medical devices, biomedical engineering, new sensor devices, body area network, and so on and so forth, that can actually bring revolution in the way the treatment is done in the country. And that is the way, rather than saying that if it will work, yes, you can adapt to it, or you should start using a glucometer, doctor will say no. Just stick to the traditional method of treatment, come back to me for a revision of doses. That is the biggest barrier. These are quick 3 slides, and I'll just flip them off. There are too many technologies that already exist in the world, so we continuously need not innovate. Technology is good, but what we have to look for is a business model. And one of my good friend, Rick, says that what you have to do is make a technology usable, rather to constantly innovate, and that will be a big push to digital health. Care or continuum of care, what you're more interested in. You go to a doctor, and traditionally it used to happen like this. My dad used to go to a doctor. He used to sit there patiently for half an hour. He used to get a prescription, get back, would comply to it as per his convenience, get sick again, and go to the same doctor without even realizing whether the treatment is working for him, he should go for a second opinion, and so on and so forth. How do we go to a doctor? I Google a doctor up before I land up in the clinic. After he gives me a prescription, I come back and Google again as to what this prescription does. So the way we have actually moved from this traditional healthcare to digital health, we have to move digital health to be a successful business model as well. And we have good entrepreneurs here to cite you examples as to what they have done to make it really successful in a country like India. Last slide, digital health for surveillance. How many of you have mobile phones? How many of you have satellites? Okay. How many of you track yourself on a daily basis? How many of you check bank accounts daily? Oh, we've got quite a number. So why do people check bank accounts on a daily basis, but they don't care about their health care? Can somebody try answering that question for me? Correct. So it has been, and I would second you in that, it has been said that till the time the patient doesn't feel a pain or discomfort, he would never land up in a doctor's clinic or even talk about healthcare. Let me cite an example from Facebook. Facebook started Facebook Health, but they moved it to an isolation later on. Reason being, healthcare is not fun. It's sad to know that you're not doing good, and that is not the way Facebook works. Facebook is not the place to talk about misery and discomfort and pain. But I think with crowdsourcing coming to healthcare, with Health 2.0, and so on and so forth, we will start opening up about healthcare, knowing, and James cited a very good example. Let me just press on it a little bit more. Today, people have actually gone to sites where they upload their blood pressure on a daily basis, see people of their age, how better they do. They actually throw challenges at each other and compete, and so on and so forth. I think this all looks like a hypothesis to you guys, because you guys would never do that, something of this sort. And that's why I say technology being usable. What works in US might not work in India, what works in India might not work in Zambia, and so on and so forth. So there is a need for constant innovation, both from the technology side and from the business model side. And this is the message that I want to impart to you. Trust me, mHealth is poised to be a 3,000 plus crore market by 2017. These are the stats that you can read and look it up. And I'm talking about India. With $3 billion industry of healthcare, if you want to make it mobile, there's a huge opportunity. And even if 2,000 entrepreneurs and 500 consultants like me crop up tomorrow, there will be enough market for everybody to play their game. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ruchi. She said something very, very relevant, where let me just capsulize it, and I want to go to Mark Fries here. But Mark is helping physicians produce content that's relevant for patients. That means nothing to you until you have an experience like me. I've been in healthcare for 20 years. In March, first week of March, doctor looks at me and says, prepare yourself for a diagnosis of leukemia. And if you don't have leukemia, you absolutely have prostate cancer. And then I walked out of the room, 20 years of healthcare experience, working in healthcare and technology. And I was in the States. I live in Kochi. Called my wife. She has 1 million questions. I call my parents. They cry for an hour. And then they have 2 million questions. All I heard is prepare yourself. And the doctor did a beautiful job of explaining exactly what is going on. And my mind comprehended everything the doctor was saying. But as soon as I walked out, the only thing I walked out with was a trauma that I have to go through a bone marrow biopsy, and if the biopsy comes back, my life changes. That's all I remember. I didn't remember anything the doctor said. So the entrepreneurs who are helping physicians communicate to patients, and patients engage in the data that the physicians who are trained for years and years and years, we'll never replace physicians' knowledge, but we can augment that. And Mark is doing something. Mark, you picking up on Dr. Ruchi's charge for entrepreneurs to help drive adoption with better design and better business models. Tell us what you're doing with WellView. And you made a pretty dramatic statement as well about the lack of information being the #1 killer in developing as well as developed countries. Can you tell us a little bit what drove you to make that statement and also what you're doing with WellView?
You bet. I think there's tremendous opportunity in digital health, especially as it relates to content and software platforms to deliver that information to individuals. As James mentioned earlier, as we look at personalized medicine, a couple things I wanted to just leave behind. One, for those would-be entrepreneurs that are out there in the audience, one, just to add encouragement to that thought process that I might want to be an entrepreneur myself and give you some insight into my background there. And then secondly, why digital health has tremendous upside and opportunities. There's tremendous financial benefit that needs to be applied across healthcare in any country. It's expensive, it's oftentimes inefficient, and you can solve those problems. There's great social benefit that you can bring, whether it's the specific example that James shared, which is multiplied millions of times a day across the world, where you can provide significant social benefit. As James mentioned earlier, we're seeing personalized medicine. We really consider ourselves the third stool of the personalized medicine, the third leg of the stool. We see tremendous growth in personalized diagnostics, which are ways to test what form of leukemia or cancer or diabetes you might have based on your genetic profile. Once you have that personalized diagnostic, then there's personalized therapeutics, where I'm getting a medication that's very unique and specific to my genetic profile, my age, my gender, my health status, et cetera. We think a really key important piece of that that's often left out is personalized information. Even if you have a great specific diagnosis and the exact right therapeutics, if you don't have an appreciation for why it's important and what you need to do with that medication, you're likely not to take it. And that's why in the US there's 2/3 non-compliance with medication protocols. So people just don't take their medications. So what we've basically developed is an app that provides a physician the opportunity to have access to information related to specific specialties. In this case, you'll see an example of our app that shows a list of medical specialties. And then on the next slide is the ability for them to provide a recorded encounter with the patient while they're having that conversation with James in his very specific and personal example that he shared, where that conversation with the physician with very high definition, easy to understand anatomical and physiological representations are shown to James, and that conversation is recorded, and that video that comes out the other side is something that he can share with his family, his friends. He can watch it 10 times to make sure that he understands it really well. It just provides what we call patient-tailored, just-in-time health information content. And the goal there is that as an empowered patient, I'm more likely to make a better decision, to understand my health status better, and then I have better improved health outcomes. There's huge financial implications for most everyone involved in the healthcare system. So we feel like there's really opportunities as it relates to mobile devices, mass customization of content, and the ability to deliver those types of solutions. And it's just an overarching theme with regards to entrepreneurship. I built a company that was similar about 12 years ago, but it was one-size-fits-all content. We were developing content early on and putting it in the cloud before it was called the cloud, and we had a software-as-a-service web-based platform when most hospitals were still getting VHS cassettes with videos on them. The difference between 12 years ago and today, there's about a 50x decrease in the cost of a camera and an editing system, which used to cost $150,000. Now you can get a $2,000 laptop and a $1,000 camera and produce HD content, high-quality stuff like Nandu's going to talk about from MDill. A lot of opportunities where the costs are dramatically different. $10,000 to host videos on a website when we started, Wired.md. Now it might be $100 a month. Now that's the sandbox that every entrepreneur in the world gets to play in today. But if you have ideas and a passion and a persistence, those tools are readily available at a much lower cost and increased accessibility. And so you can test, as one of the speakers said earlier, you can test things rapidly, find success or failure, change, adapt, and bring out new ideas. But for entrepreneurs in the digital health space, I think there's tremendous opportunities. And so I would encourage anyone thinking about it to take that leap. Wrap yourself with other people who've been there and done that and found success. And I think you'll find that same success as well. So that's where we're focusing our time and energy right now.
Mark, I want to connect what Dr. Rucci said with what you just said, give these guys a visual example, and then tie it into Ravi. So Ravi's team in Chennai is actually helping Mark's team in Portland, Oregon, develop and design the app that you see up here. Dr. Rucci said entrepreneurs get into it and drive adoption for physicians, get into the design. This is what Mark just said in plain language. The doctor is sitting with me, telling me about leukemia or prostate cancer, pulls stuff from my record, so the EHR, the electronic health record, and other content, just puts it into here, just like a film producer would, creates a storyboard. The live recording is happening while he or she is dropping images in here, and then at the end of the consultation, hits a render button, and then that video is kept on the patient portal for me and my family, or a second opinion, somebody to go back and look after again. That's what this app does. I wanted to bring it to life. And in my example, it would have been wonderful. The trauma that I went through then was explaining things to my family and friends, and I didn't have the answers because of what Dr. Rucci said before. Everybody's going to WebMD and researching every word I said, and then they're coming back with the 10 other questions. That was the greatest hassle I had. So I'm behind what Mark is doing and what Dr. Rucci just said a while ago about entrepreneurs paving the way. And so, Ravi, being an entrepreneur yourself in '98, have seen tremendous success, more than most people have in healthcare IT, and now providing R&D services for those looking to make a difference in healthcare. Ravi's based in Chennai with the group Zanuck, and I just want you to kind of give your entrepreneurial perspective, what these guys have said, and you know you're leading into Nandu, but give us a take. Ravi also sits on the Public Safety Committee for Harvard back in the U.S., so he's still connected and still advising a lot of folks around the world. The opportunity we're trying to articulate here is not just for India. We believe there are products that can come out of India that can serve the world because of the innovation around cost and quality that's required. So can you kind of give us some highlights about your perspective, and then I'm going to pull you back into your entrepreneurial days and then get into what Nandu is doing here.
Sure, okay. I'm like many of you guys here, sitting here. I was a professional, turned up working in a consulting organization and became an accidental entrepreneur, right? So I've been through the journey, starting as a startup to a public company. I understand how most of you feel and how you go through. And I think James asked me one thing. It said, all this thing about digital health, is this hype or is there some reality in it? You know, is there somebody really investing? I think Dr. Ruchi Das, I think she did a fantastic analysis. I think that you should get hold of the slides and then talk to her. I think it's real. I mean, there is some hype, you know, with everything. I think with IT there is always hype, but health is as real as it's going to get, right? I mean, that's you know, there's nothing more real than health, right? And we every day we see these problems that access to healthcare. We don't have access to healthcare, full stop, right? And it's not here in a developing world. It's even in developed economies. It's still a challenge. I mean, there are remote places. You can't, you know, doctors don't want to go there, right? I mean, they have children. They want to send them to best schools. They don't want to go there. It's not here. It's everywhere, right? And so I can list out, you know, tens and hundreds of opportunities where it is. But if I take back to my own journey, and healthcare is very slow in adopting technologies, and there's a very good reason for that. Right? There is a very good reason for that. A lot of people, why is it not adopting? It's, well, you lose a few transactions in a bank, so what? You lose some money. But you make one mistake, it's life. Right? It's life. So making software for health is very, very different than making software for other organizations, other industries. That's one thing you have to really, really remember. I've been through that journey and I understand that. Right? And so there is a very good reason why the technology is slow in being adopted. But now is the opportunity. Technology has matured a lot, right? And some proven, tried and tested technologies. I see a tremendous adoption everywhere. I mean, I think sometimes it's a re-adoption of the technology. Many problems have been solved once with the technology that was available at that time. They're being resolved again, and that's what creates a lot of opportunity. And a simple example I'll give you. When I first turned up in England, 23, 24 years ago, the biggest challenge for a doctor is identity, right? Identifying who you really are. Okay? I mean, that's the biggest, it's just a very simple thing. It's okay. I mean, when you turn up at a bank and they'll ask your name and you ask your password and they go through that. But it's very different when you are unconscious, okay? And it's very different when you are very traumatized. You don't remember your name. You can't really remember what's your surname, what's your first name, what's your middle name. They all sound alike. I mean, you turn up. Identity. Identity is the biggest challenge in healthcare. How do you identify people? Right? That is an unsolved problem. It's so easy to solve today. Every mobile phone we carry has got some kind of a reader or a scanner. You can put some little tag on, someone turns up, and then you identify. But something simple. How many hospitals you see in this country do that? How many general practitioners do that? Identity is the biggest challenge. Something very, very simple. We don't have to solve the complex problems of personalized genomics. That's someone else solving that, right? I mean, that takes a lot of money for something simple to solve. Start simple and succeed. I mean, it's a journey. It's a journey. So there are so many simple problems. I think Dr. Uchidas said that. I think that you can't have enough entrepreneurs, you can't have enough money, and you can't have enough consultants solve the opportunity which is available right in front of us. And I think I just put up a slide, and I think you can't see it properly, but I think that I sit on some of the advisory boards on venture capitals and PE firms and so on and so forth. And I give you some examples of, to back up what's been said here, to see where the money being invested. There's one statistic. In the last last 6 months in this year, the investment has been tripled, right? It's been tripled compared to last year, right? I can give you tons of examples of that. So there is money, if you got energy, if you got passion, try it and succeed, go for it.
Thanks, Ravi. Can you give us some of the numbers? So in 2011, there was a certain amount that was invested in health tech in the first 6 months. I know you had that on your piece of paper.
Yeah,
can you kind of run through that real quick?
The venture funding in the first 6 months of 2012 is $499 million invested in 46 transactions. That compared to last year, which was $156 million in 19 transactions. It tripled the investment. And you can see that. That's only in the first 6 months. And there is still a lot more. Right? And you can find lots of them. There are 4 areas where that money is went in. You can see that. And I think something basic, the money is still going into basic things like electronic medical records, digitizing, what was said. And I think some fantastic example of what Wellview and Mark are doing. I think, the patient education, and I think the communication, there's money going into that. There's something in terms of home health. I think, taking care of the home health. There's a lot of money going into that. And I believe in this. It's the democratization of information and access to healthcare. That's very, very fundamental to, I think, citizens. And I think that your point is absolutely well taken. I think that we don't really want to pay attention to it until we are sick. I mean, that's a fact of life. I think we're humans at the end of the day. We want to be happy. Okay, that's what it is. But then, when that happens, we want everything like that. That's exactly what we want. then for that, we want to pay, we don't want to pay over the odds, we want to pay as little as possible, right? That's it. You know, this is the fact. This is exactly what humans want. And you want to know how much that hospital charges, how much the other hospital charges, and which consultant is, you know, having a better outcome. And I want to choose that. You know, that's what we do every day. So there is investments going into these kind of technology. These numbers speak volumes, right? So there is opportunity.
Nandu, hearing the panel, hey, entrepreneurs lead the way, drive adoption, because this, Ravi just said it, the market does not move fast in terms of adoption, right? And then Mark talking about lack of information. You've come back from many options in your career in the US and abroad and come settled here in Bangalore and have started MDill. And you're an entrepreneur. You're what the audience is. You represent everything the audience, this whole panel right here, and that's why we're closing with you, is an entrepreneur starting a company in India, making it big with the Indian population, and one day probably global, but right now focused on India. Can you kind of lead us into what exactly you're doing, and if you're actually, somebody used a term referring to me and a group of guys that I'm hanging around with right now doing some things. Are you out of your mind? Or is there a real opportunity? Can you kind of articulate what that is?
Yeah, sure. One small clarification, actually. I came back to Bangalore, but all my family is... Great. Thank you. Just one small clarification. Although I've moved back to Bangalore, I'm actually originally from here. My grandmother lives in Malaysia, where I'm like 10 minutes away, and it's kind of crazy to see how this hotel and everything has changed, and Yeshwanthpur is so developed now. I remember when it wasn't. When I started with MDill, it really came from an idea that I had learned as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years in Latin America, which was, my assignment was to work very closely with US doctors who were doing free clinics and free surgeries. And it was there I just heard this very common story that most people suffer due to a lack of basic health information. Classic example is, here's a mother with 3 children, but none of them are inoculated against polio. You don't have to go out and reinvent the vaccine. You just need to make the information available. Here's a teenager looking for information on birth control or family planning, but that information is often very taboo, and as a result, issues like unwanted pregnancies or sexually transmitted infection rates or disproportionately affect those who don't have information. So when I started with MDill, it was really this kind of concept: how do we make information widely available on a platform that can reach huge numbers in India? And I think that that's one thing I always try to convey with MDill, is that I don't think about small numbers. I don't want to be yet another one of those 200 projects that's out there doing something in health. I want to think about how do we become really, really big. And that kind of maybe echoes parts of some of the earlier conversations earlier this morning with Naveen and Shamath, that how do we think about reaching huge numbers? Because that's the size of the problem. If we start building hospitals and start educating doctors, that's great, and we need to do that in India, but the fact of the matter is that's a 10-year process. And today, in probably a 1-mile radius of here, somebody's going to suffer a miscarriage. A child is going to fall very ill. Somebody's going to find out they have diabetes. How do we think about radical, fast-moving solutions to address the size and the scope of the problem? And so when we built MDill, it was really trying to make information widely available. Our first services were SMS, but now we're doing a lot with video, and that's resulted in some of our partners that we have today. I think there's one of the big mistakes that people make with technology companies is they believe that build it and they will come, which most often is not the case. You build it and you'll just be standing out in the desert for a very long time. I've thought about distribution. We distribute our services across Airtel, Yahoo, MSN India, Sifi, Suleika, and that has resulted in us being able to bring in partners that want to reach our audience and work with us. And just a few are up here on the slide, but this is really kind of what is the core of MDill's business now, which is creating video in local language that people can understand to empower them around their health. We started off by creating a library over the last 18 months, and maybe the next slide really kind of shows our growth. So if we think, when I started this off, like, with our video 18 months ago, people were like, oh, it's great, somebody might watch it. We're having 40, 50 video views a day. But if we look at our growth, especially over the last 7 or 8 months, the way that I highlighted is every 1 minute in India, 7 people are watching an MDill video. In this 60 minutes that we're going to sit here as an audience, 400 plus people will have come and watched an MDill video on birth control, on family planning, on women's health, on diabetes, on hypertension. And they can start watching. We've started really expanding our videos into multiple languages. And that is, I think, one of the real reasons we've had a huge increase in growth. Because if you are sitting in Hubli, you need information in Kannada. You don't even want it in English. You don't even want it in Hindi. You need it in Kannada. If you're sitting in wherever, in Cochin, you want information in Malayalam. And so this next slide, it's really hard to see. Apologies because the data is a little scrunched down. But what it highlights is kind of a distribution of where our users are coming from. There's kind of this knee-jerk reaction when I say we deliver video over mobile devices. You can come to YouTube. You can come watch our videos. You can come to mdill.com. People think, oh, okay, so maybe rich kids in Bombay are doing this. And right when we started, it was probably rich kids in Bombay. Right when we, if we go back 18 months ago, 95% of our traffic could be attributed to Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore. If you look at the distribution of the data, and this is going to be, I think, over the last 60 days, the people that have come and watched a video with MDill, you will see that it's now moved from being when I started, it was 95%, large tier 1 cities, 5% everywhere else. It's now 70-30. And if I come back again in a year, I bet you it's going to be 50-50. Because what's fundamentally driving this is when somebody gets, if you take that analogy again, you're in Hubli and you just got access to a mobile phone that's got 3G, and Airtel is making it cheap. The device is cheap. It's an Android-based device. I think about what's one of the first real uses of the internet in your hand. You're not, if you kind of listen to what happened, I love Chamat's quote earlier today, like, don't listen to TechCrunch. And to a similar degree, I say avoid reading all the, the venture capital blogs here in India, because a lot of venture capitalists fund really stupid companies in India that are trying to sell things like, hey, yet it's another, site that's selling baby clothing online. We have something like 6 different venture capital sites doing that. Like, when you get access to the internet, is that the first thing you think about? Is like, wow, let me go buy a dress for my baby girl? Or do you want to go, do I know what her inoculation schedules are? Because I want to make sure she's healthy. That is a real use of the internet, especially if you're trying to reach that guy in Mysore or that person in Pondicherry, wherever. That person who's getting access to the internet for the very first time, they're looking for information that can help them live a healthier life. So it's probably one of the reasons why I'm in some ways I'm so kind of disgusted with the state of the internet in India, because you see a lot of really ridiculous companies getting funded, and you see things that just don't make sense, that have horrible unit economics. And I just show our user growth. My user growth is organic. Again, every 1 minute in India, 7 people are watching an MDill video. I don't go out and pay to advertise that. It's by word of mouth, because we're solving a fundamental problem that people will look for health information in a language they can understand.
Nandu, is this on? Hello?